In this video, we're going to take a look at how Excel represents times. And so let's start off by entering a time in here. Let's enter 12 noon. And you just enter with a colon between the hours and the minutes, then a space, and then the AM or the PM, and 12 noon is PM. And Excel immediately gives you two hints that this was a time that you entered and that you entered it correctly. First of all, it right aligns it in the cell. And the fact that it's right aligned should tell you that somehow it's represented using a number. And the other thing is that even though I typed in a lowercase PM, it switched it to an uppercase PM. So those are two little visual clues that Excel gives you to let you know that you did type in a valid time. So let's try typing in another time. Let's type in 4 p.m. And again, Excel recognizes that correctly. Now, what's going on behind the scenes here? Let's take a look. Change the formatting to general and see what's going on. Okay. 12 noon is 0.5, and 12 noon is 12 hours through a 24-hour day, so it is half a day. So what Excel does to represent times is it actually represents the time as a fraction of a day. 12 noon is half a day. You should recognize this fraction as the fraction 2/3, or a real close approximation of the fraction 2/3, which we can't actually write in decimal because it never ends. And 2/3 of a day would be 2/3 of 24 is 16, so we'd be 16 hours through the day, which would be 4 p.m. Okay, and so the reason it represents times like this is the same reason that it represents dates the way it represents dates, so that we can do time arithmetic. We can subtract these two numbers here and figure out how much time has elapsed. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to change my formatting back to time, and then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to just subtract. And I want to take the larger time minus the smaller time and hit enter. And here's where Excel tries to guess what I'm doing, and it figures because I had a time in row 1 and a time in row 2 that whatever appears in row 3 here must be a time as well. And actually, you know, 4 hours is what is elapsed, and what it does is it represents that as the number 4 a.m., which is actually another way of saying 4 hours. But I don't really want it that way. What I want is I want to see what that is as a general. And you should recognize that as the number 1/6. And if you take the number 2/3 minus 0.5, you get 1/6. So 1/6 of a day has elapsed. But that number is usually not what you want. Usually you want to know how many hours it's been. So if I take that number up there and I multiply it times the number of hours in a day, it tells me how many hours have elapsed. Okay. You can also combine dates and times. Let's type in today's date, and then a space, and then let's type in a time. Let's say I want, let's do 2 p.m. and hit enter. And the first thing you notice here is that it changed the 2 p.m., which is what I typed in, into 24-hour time, a military times, and gives me 1400. We can change that, but first let's type in another date and time. So another time today, and a space, and let's say 5:30, okay, or 5:50 as well. Okay, 5:50 doesn't matter. And I want to know, first of all, let's take a look at how that's represented internally. Okay. And it turns out that it's actually pretty simple. It is the combination of the date serial number to the left of the decimal point, and it is the fraction of a day on the right side of the decimal point. So if I do date arithmetic here and I subtract this number minus this, basically I'm going to get 0 over here on the left side, and it'll tell me what fraction of a day has elapsed. And now let's go back here and let's format those as times. And you know what, I am going to change this one to 5:30. Okay, and that should be 3.5 hours. So let's compute the elapsed time here. Take the bigger number minus the smaller number, and again, it's formatting that as a time for us when I want it formatted as a general. So that fraction of a day has passed, a little over 14% of the day. And I want to know how many hours that is, and it should be 3.5. So if I take that number and I multiply it by the number of hours in a day, 24, and hit the enter key, it should tell me that 3.5 hours have passed. I'm guessing that most of the time when you want to do stuff with dates, you will not enter, actually I formatted that wrong, didn't I? I wanted to include the date on there as well. So let's go back over here. And let's go to more number formats, and let's take a look at time. And one of our options down here is to include the date and the time. There we go. But I'm guessing that most of the time you're just going to enter times like this. Now, something kind of interesting happens here. If you take this and you format it as, actually I don't need to go there, let's do it the easy way. Let's take our format painter, and this is our paint here, and then click on the paintbrush and then drag it over these two, and this was formatted with a date, so it tries to put a date on here. Well, the serial number was 0, and you know, the first valid serial number as far as representing days is concerned would be the number 1, which is January 1st, 1900. And so what's the day 0? Well, it's, you know, you think, well, maybe it's December 31st, but it really doesn't have a date associated with it. So basically it's just a pure time. But that's what you're getting on the left side of the decimal point here. If I go back to general, you know, you're getting zeros over there. So when you do a time, it's just going to be entered as a fraction of a day. And let's go back here and let's format those the way that they were before. Format them as times. Okay. And if I want to do date arithmetic on two dates that are on the same day, you know, I take the big one, subtract the smaller one, and everything works out fine. If I'm doing dates along with them, then everything works out fine as well. You may run into a problem though if you have to do something like this. Let's say you have somebody, you know, working the graveyard shift from 11 to 7, and they come in at 11:00 p.m. Enter, and then they work until 7 a.m. the following morning. Okay. Well, let's take a look. I mean, you can figure out what's going to happen here. I want to format those as general, and I want to take when they got off work and subtract when they came, and that's supposed to give me the elapsed time. But as you can see, if I do that, I'm going to get a negative number. Okay, so let's go back and reformat them the way that they should be. Let's go back and format those as times. So if that's a possibility, there's two ways to fix it. I mean, one is I can just go in and I can add a date to this. So if this is 7/31/13 space, and this is the next day, so let's go in here and type 8/1/13 and a space and hit enter. Now if I look at those two numbers here as general, okay, now when I subtract them, it's going to work out just fine, because this is a time from August 1st and this is a time from July 31st. So if I subtract them, I should get you know, 8 hours, or 1/3 of a day. So if let's put a little formula in here, and let's do equals this number minus this number here, and 1/3 of a day. And if I go down here and say let's multiply that number times the number of hours in a day, it should tell me that person worked for 8 hours. Okay. Now, but what if you don't want to bother to put all that time information in, but you know that sometimes the quitting time, or the second time value that's typed in, is going to be a time the following day. So let's try that number again. Let's try 11 p.m. and let's try 7 a.m. Okay, and if this number is bigger than this number, then everything is good. Okay, all you have to do is subtract them. That means they basically means that they occurred on the same day, and we're just figuring out how many hours have elapsed in the course of that day. But if this number here is smaller than this number, then it means that we have a time period that, you know, overlaps the midnight hour. So what do you have to do when that happens? Well, you have to do an if. Okay, so let's do an if, and we need a logical test. So if this number here is bigger than this number here, then all I want to do is subtract the big one minus the little one. But if it's not, what I need to do is I need to take D2 and basically add 1 to it, and then subtract D1 and enter, and okay. So If I look at my expression here, this is false. This number is not bigger than this number. It's smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the second part of my if formula here and basically add 1 to it, which basically pushes it on to the next day. So if they came in at 11 p.m. and they quit at 7 a.m. the next morning, then they were there for 8 hours, which is 1/3 of a day, and that's what our fraction is here. But again, we want to convert that to hours. So we're going to take that number, we're going to multiply it by the number of hours in a day, equals 24, and we get 8 hours. So that's basically how times are represented in Excel. And in our next video, we're going to take a look at some of the built-in functions that deal with times in Excel.